I heard it before I saw anyone. A voice low, careless, followed by a laugh that wasn't meant to be cruel, but somehow landed that way anyway. Why is she even still alive? The words slid through the wooden slats of the gate and lodged somewhere deep in my chest. Not sharp enough to make me gasp, just precise enough to split something open. I stood there holding a glass dish of peach cobbler, still warm against my palms. The sugar had bubbled over the edge and hardened slightly, sticky where I'd wiped it clean. I remember noticing that. Strange, the things you notice when the ground shifts beneath you. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I could have turned around, pretended I hadn't heard a thing. I even considered setting the dish down on the step and leaving it there like a peace offering with no sender. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the gate. The backyard looked exactly as it always did in summer. String lights looped too tightly, folding tables arranged without much thought, paper plates bending under food no one would remember eating. The air smelled like grilled meat and citronella candles, smoke and sweetness tangled together. People were laughing, talking, living. No one turned when I walked in. I moved through the yard slowly as if I belonged there. Past faces I knew well enough to have once memorized their birthdays. Past others I'd only seen across holiday tables. Some were family. Some were strangers. None of them smiled. "Oh, Mabel. We didn't know you were coming." Jody's voice. Bright. Tight around the edges. The same voice I'd heard behind the fence. "I brought cobbler," I said, lifting the dish slightly. No one reached for it. So I found an empty place at the far end of the table and sat down. The folding chair creaked under my weight, complaining louder than I ever did. My back ached, but I straightened anyway. Old habits die hard. Sit up, take less space, don't be a burden. Music played from a speaker nearby. Something loud and fast. The kind of song that doesn't leave room for silence. At some point my son raised a beer. "To family," he said. Glasses clinked. Laughter followed. No one looked in my direction. Children ran past me, my grandchildren, bare feet slapping the grass, ponytails flying. Not one of them stopped. Not one said hello. I wondered, briefly, if they recognized me without the grocery bags, without the apron, without the quiet usefulness I used to wear like a uniform. I stayed anyway. I stayed through the eating and the talking and the gradual drifting indoors. I helped stack plates no one had asked me to touch. Folded napkins already stained beyond saving. Wiped the sticky table with a damp paper towel while the laughter moved farther away. When I finally picked up my empty dish, the glass was still warm from the sun. And as I walked out through the gate, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was thinking very clearly for the first time in a long while. What happens next when you stop pretending not to hear the truth? The morning after the gathering arrived without ceremony. No storm. No dramatic sky. Just light slipping through the kitchen window like it always had. Landing on the same table where my son once did his homework. Legs too long for the chair. Pencil tapping when he didn't know an answer. I noticed the quiet first. Not the peaceful kind. This one pressed inward like a held breath. I made coffee in my smallest pot. 1 cup. That felt important, though I didn't know why yet. I sat alone at the table, fingers wrapped around the mug, and waited for something to happen. A phone call. A message. A sense of regret sharp enough to sting. Nothing came. The house didn't care what had happened the day before. Houses never do. The cobbler dish was already clean. I'd washed it the night before, dried it carefully, and slid it back into the cabinet as if it were just another Sunday. That's what I was good at, making endings look ordinary. I didn't leave the house that day. Not really. I stepped outside once to collect the mail, but I didn't open a single envelope. I wasn't ready to see his name printed neatly on bills for a house that had once been mine. Not ready to feel that particular kind of erasure. That house, their house, had begun with my signature. $40,000. That was the number. I'd pulled it from my retirement account years ago. Back when belief felt safer than caution. "Just to help you get started," I'd said, smiling through the knot in my stomach. No paperwork that asked for anything in return. Love doesn't invoice itself. Or so I thought. The filing cabinet sat in the corner of the room, untouched for years. Babe. Stubborn. I hadn't opened the bottom drawer in a long time. That drawer held the things you trust enough not to revisit. I pulled it open. Folders leaned against each other like tired shoulders. Insurance, taxes, old warranties. And then there it was. A tab with his name written in my careful handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the floor instead, back against the cabinet, and let the weight of the day before settle fully into my body. The laugh, the sentence, the way it hadn't echoed because it didn't need to. It had landed clean. When I finally opened the folder, I wasn't looking for numbers. I knew those by heart. I was looking for names. Whose name sat where? Who owned what? Who had been given access to parts of my life I'd stopped monitoring out of trust, or maybe exhaustion. I found the agreement. The deed. The letter I'd written in ink that now looked thinner than I remembered. Because you're my son. Reading that line hurt more than the laughter. That night I didn't cry. I slept deeply. No pills. No pacing. Not peace, something closer to alignment, like two long misaligned bones finally shifting into place. Before bed, I wrote a name on a blank sheet of paper. Then, without hesitation, I drew a single line through it. I didn't know yet what that line meant. Only that it wasn't the end. And that whatever came next would not ask for permission. By Wednesday, the quiet had changed. It was no longer waiting. It was working. I dressed carefully that morning. Pressed slacks, real shoes, the good coat even though the weather didn't call for it. When you're about to ask difficult questions, it helps to look like someone who deserves honest answers. Or maybe I just needed the armor of buttons and seams. Lena's house smelled like lemon cleaner and peppermint tea. It always had. Order lived there, the kind that didn't apologize for itself. We'd met years ago at a bridge club and stayed in touch in the loose way women do when they recognize something steady in one another. I placed the folder on her kitchen table. I have questions, I said, about what can still be undone. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and opened it. Her eyes moved quickly, too quickly for sentiment. Pages slid against each other with a soft, efficient sound. Finally, she leaned back. You can't take the house back, she said gently. It was a gift. Clean and final. I know, I replied. And I did. I'd known the moment I heard the laugh. Some doors don't reopen. But, she continued, tapping the folder, that doesn't mean you're powerless. The word powerless sat between us, heavy and familiar. I hadn't used it out loud in years, but it recognized me immediately. She explained things I hadn't thought to question before. Accounts, permissions, documents signed in moments of fear after my fall years ago, when I thought responsibility looked like proximity. Just in case, I'd said then. In case something happens. Something had. She slid a checklist toward me. Not a plan options. I folded it once and tucked it into my purse. That evening, I returned to my kitchen table. No radio. No television. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock I'd never bothered to fix. Silence used to frighten me. Now it felt like space. I took out another blank page and wrote a name at the top. Carl. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I drew a single line through it, slow, deliberate, straight. On Thursday, I baked a pie I didn't intend to share. Blueberry. Lemon zest. The good crust. The one I used to save for birthdays, holidays, moments when love was expected to perform. This time there was no occasion. Just hunger. Just choice. I sat on the porch while it cooled, knees tucked beneath an old Afghan, and watched the street. Children on bikes. Someone mowing 2 houses down. A car pulling into the driveway across from mine. I recognized it immediately. They went inside without knocking. Confident. Certain. Comfortable in a place that hadn't invited me in months. That's when I noticed the drawer. The one in the hallway I'd kept stocked for years. Stickers, tiny notebooks, little things meant for small hands. Just in case. That drawer had waited longer than I should have. I emptied it that afternoon. Every last thing into a paper bag. I set it by the curb with the recycling. Sat there for hours. Unclaimed. That night my phone buzzed. Hey, Jody thinks she might have hurt your feelings on Sunday. Didn't mean anything by it. You know how family events are. I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Not archived. Not saved. Deleted. 7. There was a knock. Not who I thought. Just Kay from next door, holding soup and asking about her cat. I invited her in. We split the pie. She said it made her knees hum. We laughed. I hadn't realized how much I needed that sound. After she left, I picked up an old photo. Me and my son. 1987. Missing tooth. Wide smile. I miss you. Lena's office was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Not empty, contained. Like every sound knew where it was allowed to exist. Files stacked neatly. A mug that read I read contracts for fun. A glass jar of peppermints no one ever seemed to touch. I want to start with the power of attorney, I said, placing the document between us. Revoke it. Today. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Not surprised. Just careful. That's a big change, Mabel. I know. She nodded once and slid the paper toward her side of the desk. We'll notarize it this morning. As the printer hummed, I noticed my hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud and hurried. This felt closer to repair, setting something back where it belonged. I also want to update the will, I said when the forms were ready. Remove my son as executor. She paused. Just long enough for the gravity to settle. You want to remove him entirely? Yes. She didn't argue. Didn't ask me to explain myself in softer words. She simply opened a clean template and began typing. The sound of the keys was steady, almost comforting. And the house? She asked. The house goes to no one in the family, I said. Sell it. The proceeds go to a place that matters. I reached into my purse and handed her a worn brochure. A women's shelter on Greenway Avenue. I'd stayed there once, long before motherhood, long before people learned to take my presence for granted. She studied it quietly. You're very clear, she said. I've been unclear long enough. By the time I left, the air outside felt sharper. Some days you carry your own weather. At home the phone blinked. Hey Mom. Got your message about legal stuff. Not sure what's going on. Jody says you were acting weird last weekend. Call me. I deleted it. Then I blocked the number. The locksmith came the next morning. Young. Polite. He didn't ask questions when I asked him to change both locks. When he handed me the new keys, I made 4 copies. One for my purse. One for the safe box. One for Kay. One for a future I hadn't named yet. I slept without dreaming. On Saturday, rain softened the morning. I pulled on my boots and worked in the garden, trimming back marigolds that had grown wild. The shears felt good in my hand. Control has weight when you haven't held it in a while. At noon I went to the bank. Authorized users? The manager asked, scrolling. Yes. She read the name aloud. My son's. Remove him, I said. All access. Everything. Her fingers paused, then moved. Cancelled cards. New passwords. New questions. Locked accounts. Each click felt like a stitch closing something that had been open too long. When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. That evening, I removed his birth certificate from the lockbox. Not to destroy it, just to separate it. History belongs somewhere different than power. Later, I crossed out names in my address book. Then I wrote a new one under L. Lena Moore. Attorney. That night, the rain tapped softly against the roof. I slept with the windows open and felt something settle. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had already decided. They came when the silence got inconvenient. Not right away. Not when I stopped calling. Not when I disappeared from birthdays and Sunday dinners. Silence, when it's quiet and obedient, is easy to ignore. But when it starts rearranging things, accounts, locks, futures, it becomes a problem that demands a voice. The first knock came on a Thursday evening. I knew it wasn't Kay. She knocked like she was apologizing for existing. This knock was measured, practiced, polite enough to sound reasonable. When I opened the door, my son stood there, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the porch like he was looking for instructions he'd misplaced. Mom, he said, you changed the locks. Yes. He blinked, thrown off by the lack of explanation. You blocked my number. Yes. You can't just... He stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what's going on. I didn't invite him in. I heard what was said. I told him. In the backyard. His shoulders stiffened. You weren't supposed to hear that. That's exactly the problem. He frowned. Jody didn't mean it. You know how she talks. It was a joke. A joke has a punchline, I said. That was just cruelty wrapped in laughter. He looked past me into the hallway, like he expected to see proof of the woman who used to soften everything for him, the one who explained him to himself. The hallway was bare. "So that's it," he said. "One bad afternoon and you erase me?" I almost laughed. "One afternoon doesn't erase decades," I said quietly. "It just reveals them." His jaw tightened. "Ruby says you're letting her visit." "She asked," I replied. "You didn't." His eyes flickered. That landed. "This is about money," he said. "No," I answered. "This is about dignity." He stepped back like the word had weight. Behind him, a car door slammed. High heels clicked sharply against concrete. His wife appeared beside him, posture straight, mouth already shaped for argument. "This has gone far enough," she said, stepping forward as if the house still belonged to her narrative. "You've blocked him. You've changed accounts. Now I hear you're moving." "All true," I said calmly. She scoffed. "You don't just get to erase family because of one comment." "It wasn't one comment," I said. "It was years of being tolerated instead of welcomed." She crossed her arms. "We never asked you for anything." "That's the problem," I replied. "You never asked. You just assumed." Her voice sharpened. "You're punishing Ruby." I paused then, not because she was right, but because guilt still knew how to knock. "Ruby came to me alone," I said. "She knows what a closed door feels like." Silence stretched between us. "You'll regret this," she said finally. "Maybe," I answered. "But not as much as I regret staying quiet." They left without another word. I closed the door, not slammed, just shut. And as the house settled around me, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to before. They hadn't come because they missed me. They came because they were losing access. After they left, I cried. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying that needs an audience. I sat on the edge of the couch and cried for exactly 7 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. Endings deserve time, but not endless space. When the tears stopped, they stopped cleanly. I made tea. Sugar, no milk. My mother always said milk softened things too much. I carried the mug into the living room and sat in the chair by the window, the one everyone avoided because it faced the street and offered nothing entertaining. I liked it there. You could see who was coming long before they knocked. The house felt different now. Not emptier. Lighter. Like it had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. The next few days passed quietly, but the quiet wasn't passive anymore. It had direction. I began packing, not in a rush, not dramatically. One drawer at a time. One decision at a time. Not do I need this, but does this make me stronger? If the answer was no, it went into the donate pile. Survival teaches you to keep everything. Healing teaches you to choose. In the back bedroom, the one that had once been my son's, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the old apple tree. It leaned left now, crooked from years of weather, but every spring it bloomed anyway. Defiant. I remembered the afternoon he climbed it and got stuck, screaming until I came out barefoot and furious, dragging the ladder behind me. The way he hugged me afterward, shaking, embarrassed, relieved. "Don't tell anyone," he'd said. I never did. That night my phone rang. A blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. "Mabel, it's Jody," the message said. Her voice was tight, clipped. "We don't understand what you're doing. Carl's upset. Ruby's confused. This is really sad, you know? If this is about attention." I deleted it halfway through. That's when it finally became clear. The laughter behind the gate hadn't been about me being old, or inconvenient, or unnecessary. It was about certainty. They were laughing because they believed I was permanent. Fixed. A fixture. A woman who would always show up with casseroles and checks in silence. Someone who could be dismissed without consequence. Why is she even still alive? Because in their minds, my life had already been reduced to usefulness. And when usefulness ends, people like that don't know what to do with what remains. A few days later, the call came from my granddaughter. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly. "Is this still your number?" Something shifted then. Not forgiveness. Not relief. Just truth stepping into the room. She apologized, not cleanly, not perfectly, but honestly. For laughing when she shouldn't have. For pretending not to see me. For choosing belonging over kindness. I didn't rush to comfort her. That laugh, I told her gently. That was the sound of people forgetting I was human. She was quiet for a long time. I don't want to forget, she said. We agreed to meet. Just us. After the call, I sat alone and finally understood the full shape of what I was doing. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was answering a question that had been asked out loud. Why is she still alive? Because I still had a name. Because I still had choices. Because I still had a future that didn't require permission. And because some women don't disappear quietly just because others are done benefiting from them. The laughter hadn't broken me. It had woken me up. Moving day arrived without ceremony. No speeches. No apologies left on the porch. Just morning light slipping through bare windows and the soft scrape of boxes against the floor. I stood in the kitchen one last time barefoot, the linoleum cool under my feet, and brewed coffee in the chipped mug I'd used for decades. The house was quiet. Not the lonely kind, but the satisfied kind. Like it understood. I walked through each room slowly. Not to cling. To thank. The hallway where pencil marks once tracked my son's height. The living room where laughter used to land easily before it learned to wound. The back door that had heard everything and kept my secret. I locked the front door behind me and didn't look back. Not because it didn't matter, but because it finally didn't own me. The new apartment was small. Honest. Light pooled gently on clean walls that hadn't learned anyone's disappointments yet. The first thing I unpacked was the kettle. The second was a pencil drawing my granddaughter had made. A woman seated at a chessboard, calm, upright, her pieces few but placed exactly where they needed to be. She's not done, the girl had written. She's just starting to play her game. I hung it where the afternoon sun could find it. In the days that followed, my life grew quieter but fuller. Tea with neighbors who didn't ask for explanations. Baking because I wanted to, not because I was expected to. Silence that felt like rest instead of rejection. My granddaughter came often. Alone. Honest. We didn't talk about the past unless it asked to be remembered. We talked about books. About her plans. About what it feels like to choose yourself for the first time and realize the world doesn't end. It simply rearranges. One afternoon, I planted marigolds in a small pot on my balcony. Just 3 seeds. Not for beauty. For proof. Proof that things can still grow when you stop trampling the soil. The house sold. The money went where it mattered. To women who leave with nothing but courage and the clothes on their backs. I delivered the check myself. No name attached. No announcement. Just intention. Weeks later, a letter arrived. From my son. He apologized without excuses. Admitted he'd laughed when he shouldn't have. That he'd stayed quiet when he should have spoken. That he was afraid he'd learned too late how to see me. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not forgiveness. Not rejection. Just space. On my 73rd birthday, I woke without an alarm. No balloons. No social media posts written by obligation. Just morning light and the sound of rain somewhere far away. My granddaughter arrived at noon with tulips and a handmade card. Inside she'd written, "Thank you for keeping a seat for me." We drank tea. We laughed. And when she left, I sat alone on the balcony and finally answered the question that had been asked behind that gate. Why am I still alive? To remember my name. To set my own table. To keep the door open just wide enough for those who knock with clean hands. And to remind anyone listening that silence is not weakness. Until you use it to disappear yourself. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone who was slowly being erased, or if it gave you permission to choose yourself without apology, please like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories told from the heart. Because some voices don't need to be loud, they just need to be heard.